Okay, we are live. Welcome into episode number 48. This is Culture War Moments with Nick. If you remember, anybody who's been listening since the first couple of episodes, Nick was an original co host here on Offensively Accurate. That was back when it was me, him, and Thane. And we kind of kept things a bit more tight knit around the Christian realm. But we were actually more specifically talking about culture war issues and things that kind of where we broadly kind of fell on the spectrum. So Nick agreed to come back, especially because of recent developments that have been going on for an episode, especially when it relates to just the nonsense that's going on in our culture. Everyone in the audience has an idea of what that seems like. The other thing too is if you see the powered by StreamYard in the corner, that is because I switched to StreamYard for this stream specifically. The ease in which to get guests in compared to OBS is night and day, especially because if you're familiar with the Jar Opener podcast I do with Worrell, it's way easier to do this through StreamYard than it is anything else. That's kind of where we stuck with it. And new upcoming announcements. So just subscribe on YouTube, follow on X, follow on TikTok, follow on Spotify, and share the show if you enjoy it. So introducing though, Nick, I'm going to go ahead and bring him on screen here. And who are you, sir? And what do you do?
Yeah, my name is Nick. I've been around, for a while. Haven't been avoiding this for like any particular reason, just like haven't had the time. But I hit Atlas up a few days ago, and I was like, man, I feel like there's been so much that's been happening. I feel like I gotta get on some platform and talk about it.
That was actually going to lead in with one of these questions, which was like, was it anything like specific that you saw that you were like, what is this?
I think it's more so like just it feels like the societal norms are like really setting in, and I feel like they're getting more and more outrageous, and just in the sense of like degeneracy, obviously. And it feels like more so there's been a lot of like mockery of Christianity, which has always been prevalent, but it feels more apparent now. And I'm like I guess, yeah, it feels like every time I start really deep diving into the Bible and like trying to strengthen my faith, feels like I get those constant things that pull me away from it. It feels like, I also just notice more apparently just how people act and just kind of how things go. It's
like having the I can never remember what that movie's called. People are going to make fun of me for it. But it's when he's got the glasses and he's like trying to get everyone else to wear the glasses. Like, no, you can't see it. You have to wear these glasses. Oh man, it's a famous movie, but it's essentially where there's like these alien creatures, but you can only see them if you're wearing like these glasses.
Oh
and
yeah.
Make that point where it's like, without the Bible, these people can't even really they're not even aware most of the time. They're kind of more like ignorant of like the stuff they partake in.
Yeah.
We have a few different things we can actually go in directions of. We'll probably start with the culture stuff here, which is this Secret Level, which is a new anthology series. And it looks pretty phenomenal. It's one of these things, especially in the realm of Hollywood, where I'm so discontent with the content that comes out. This one was one that was like finally like, okay, this seems okay. So go ahead and take a listen to it. It's about a minute and a half trailer long, or a minute and a half long. And make sure the audio is okay. But anybody out in the audience, if the audio is too high or too low, please let me know. I'll adjust accordingly.
That's 40K.
Right. They misspelled it in the title.
Yeah. It's time. This world has waited for your arrival.
Do you ever watch that Love, Death, and Robots?
My brothers have always wanted me to watch it. I've never gotten into it.
That's interesting.
Because you are the chosen.
Good animation.
Because it's similar, right? It's like a sci-fi anthology.
Yeah. It's like
adventure.
Compared to Black Mirror in a way. A bunch of random stories.
Just for you.
Keanu? Again?
I know. He can't leave.
No.
have a game to play.
Now I'm not so sure this is 40K.
I think from the very beginning it seemed like that. If you caught it too, it was Pac-Man as well.
Yeah, what did it say the name?
Yeah, if I go ahead and I back out here, it said a couple of them. It flashed them there. So Pac-Man, Mega Man, forgive me, Warhammer 40K, I'm assuming, and more. But if we actually, if I just scale this, so it seems, Dungeons and Dragons,
okay.
but Outer Worlds 2.
Interesting.
That I would be actually very keen to step in on that. Actually,
yeah, I remember
we
when
have
you
what
got that game. The first
Honor
one.
of Kings, a bunch of stuff I've never even like kind of been into. Sifu was like that Asian like karate fighting game, if I remember correctly.
I can't remember that one. I remembered all the other ones though. Not a huge fan of Armored Core, but
me either. I'm not big on like the big mech fighting, but I guess I thought this was cool because I figured, you know, if they go ahead and adapt to new anthologies of like these previous games that are a bit older, it's going to be one of two things. When from what I saw there, it seems like it's going to kind of keep its original intent, especially with Warhammer 40K. I really would have a hard time knowing how you'd make that woke, to be real.
Yeah,
but hopefully it just is as is, right? And they just adapt these things as normal.
Yeah.
But let me see here. I know, just very exciting. I just wanted to point that out to people because I saw it and it seemed pretty awesome. But on to actual like culture war topic stuff. I think one of the first things I wanted to go to here that's going to be very, very politically related, and you know, and the fun's over, guys. We'll switch here. I don't know if I can actually bring it over in. Oh yeah, I can. I can do it just like this. I swing it over like this.
I think it's nice to start lighthearted before we just tear people apart.
We have to. But this is from Charlie Kirk, and I don't know how closely you've been following, I guess, news that's revolving around the election and like, you know, some of the policies have been putting forward. But this is a new one, and it goes alongside with a couple other ones. Now, this is Trump will reportedly make it a felony for any medical professional to perform surgery on a minor without parental consent. So obviously a huge strike against these, you know, places like California, Colorado. You know, there's a couple more that I can't really think of that are on the tip of my tongue that do allow children to come in with no guardians to then begin partaking in like hormone therapy. And I'm assuming with the performing surgery on a minor, one state, if not more, had to have been allowing full gender surgeries without allowing parental consent.
Yeah.
That is just insane.
I know that's like, I've heard that's what it was moving towards at least. But yeah, no, I've talked with my friends about this issue so many times where I'm just like, I don't even understand how that's a thought that a minor could get any sort of surgery or anything like that without parental consent, which more so is just saying like it's children of the corn. Like when are we going to let it stop? You know, like just why don't we just let kids go to war before they're 18 too? I mean, what's stopping giving children more power? It's like the reasons that there's age limits on things is because children aren't developed enough to think for themselves. So like, how could you allow that without parental consent? It just doesn't make sense to me.
And, you know, and I actually had like this tidbit not too long ago, and it was because I got this idea when I didn't get this idea, but more so I heard it from Carl Benjamin worded this way. You know, in liberalism, you know, in its most base form and its origin form, it is kind of meant to atomize people to the very individual level, almost to go so far as, you know, in directions like this, where children are in some form shouldn't be tethered to their parents. And so I think stuff like this kind of falls in line with that, where it's like kids should be allowed to do what they want, you know? And that's when you get to these kind of arguments with parents where they're like, do you hate your kids? Or they say it's good parenting to listen to your kid. And it's like, so you listen to your 6-year-old kid when he tells you he wants to be a girl, so you just go ahead and do it. Like there's no backstop there. There's no moral foundation there. And it just runs off of that very liberal idea of like, oh, everyone can make choices for themselves. And like, that's it. It's like a vacuous space, right?
Yeah.
It's just an absurd kind of thought to me.
You know, I come from like a very independent political stance, and like, you know, even when we did those political alignment tests, I was even more left. But funny enough, I had this conversation with a close friend of mine who was, you know, liberal, and I mean, we went through like extreme scenarios, of course, like what if your kid wants a sex change and they're like, you know, they're like 13 years old and they're like, I'm gonna kill myself if you don't let me. And my first response was like, no, why would I? I'm not gonna do that. I'm gonna like seek help for that person. I'm not gonna like, obviously I don't want my child to kill themselves, but to act like it's wrong for me or like I don't love my child because I'm not sending or I'm not going to allow them to get the surgery. It's like I said, well, what if they said the same thing, but about like, I don't know, a tattoo or, you know, some sort of like, I want to move to a different state to do this schooling for something I'm really passionate about, or I'm going to kill myself. It's like, well, we could have talked about it before you said that, you know?
I, I mean, but that I think that just on its face shows like the absurdity of it, right? Like
Yeah.
you just don't listen to kids, and this is a reason why, for hundreds of different reasons, right? You go from like their brains aren't fully developed to, you know, we have legal implications that regard around like 18 years old. I mean, most commonly, people even point out the fact of how kind of insane it is that you can't drink alcohol, but you can go to war at 18 years old. So that's been one of the like kind of like leading arguments for like bringing you know, the age of 21 down in certain avenues down to 18. And so I think even in most states, if not all, you have to be 25 to rent a car. You know, and to think like there's a 7-year gap between when you're eligible to go fight and die and then when you can rent a vehicle is like it's outright nonsensical. Some of
Well,
this stuff, you know, it's hard to make sense of.
what you know what's funny is like it yeah, like I think it's like kind of like how you're talking about the alcohol thing. It's yeah, I believe that you can drink underage with your parents' consent. I think it's like 16 or something like that.
Yeah.
Like obviously at home, not like any like somehow the cops would come to your house and be like your child's drunk, but you know, I believe there is a legality to doing that. And then it's like, but you're going to make it legal for a child to get surgery before you make that, like, before you just make a child allowing to drink on their own. I mean, I don't know. It just
Well,
doesn't add
the
up.
what ends up happening is they end up they use the language of, oh, it's healthcare.
Mhm.
So what they'll end up doing is same thing with abortion, right? They go, you know, people want to put forward whether it's a federal national abortion ban or whether it's a state abortion ban or depending on what state it is. And then what's the argument from the left? Oh, you're denying people health care. And then it's like, at what certain point then do you just say like, no, like killing a child isn't healthcare, right? So this is a kind of like in the same avenue of how dare you deny your children healthcare, right? But it's not, it's in no form healthcare. But they do these things is like what, you know, it's gender dysphoria, and there's like the DS5 and different ways that they label these things, and they say, well, your child has exhibited these symptoms, so if you don't go forward with this, we'll take your kids from you. And in certain avenues, I'm very familiar with the case with Jeff Younger, and I don't know how familiar you are with Jeff Younger's case, but his is the one where he fought in Texas against the transitioning of his child, and he won a, I think he won a hold, really is what it was called. And then his wife kidnapped the kids, ran to California. So now California is protecting her while they go through this court case. And Jeff Younger is being denied any kind of visitation. He's not allowed to see medical records. I mean, that's the whole 9 yards.
How does
So
that
he's
not get
trying to,
like federal at that point? If it's literally kidnapping of your child.
and the reason being is the GOP and churches turned his back on him. So he's got like a long story of how all these people he's went to, all the different kind of representatives. In fact, I think the only one that really even helped him out a little bit was Ken Paxton, who's the Attorney General of Texas. But it just goes to show that some of these stances that would require an actual kind of hardcore backing to them, which is like no outright period, we're not going to even play this game. Even like mainstream Republicans who should be assisting with this guy, who you would imagine be like the state reps, all want nothing to do with this. Now, the reason why I think it will become federal news is because the way it seems right now, the way the court case is playing out, is they're going to rule against him. And they are then going to allow the castration and sterilization of one of his sons. I believe the son's name is James. At that point, though, and he said he said it himself. I mean, he's going to raise the black flag. Like, he, as a father, is not going to allow that to happen. And so he's trying to show everybody, I tried fighting this in the most legal and civil ways possible, but when you lose in the courts, it's like that's it, right? Like, that's the last stop.
Yeah.
Outside of that, there's nothing else you can do with outside of like some kind of crazy injunction from a higher court coming down. I think that would be a case where you see actual kind of civil war strife. You see somebody who's like not doing this and they run out. And so then what happens is, if California goes, hey, Texas, you need to extradite Jeff Younger and send him to California for to serve prison. And Texas goes, we don't even recognize that court. Like, you're not getting him. If you want him, come and get him. And then it puts states against each other. And that's where I can see an actual kind of civil war kind of building out from this, especially for something like this egregious. And you can stretch that to abortion too. Say it's a girl who's in Oklahoma, abortion's outlawed, and it's a husband and a wife, but the wife doesn't want it for whatever reason. The husband does. And it's generally not always the way it goes around, but seeing how the woman is the one who's pregnant, it typically turns out to be that she will be the one that wants to carry it out most of the time. Mm-hmm. Not saying that there's not men who don't want to get abortions as well on their own kind of like evil tendencies. But to even stretch that, and then say this woman goes to Colorado and then she gets an abortion, that guy is going to then want Oklahoma to then prosecute her as a child murderer. But then I bet in Colorado, they go, no, we don't recognize that. So on the same grounds, it's like pinning states against each other. And now we're going to have like refuge states where it's like, this state is where you go if you want to get this done. This state is where you want to go if you want to get abortions. And so it's not, it's building up to be like a pressure cooker where like states are just going to be at odds with each other, especially if you don't get one going hard the other way. No, I don't want it to be across the board we allow children to get sex changes. I would rather prefer it's not at all. But say you don't get that, it's going to lead it up to people going to go back and forth between states, and I can only imagine chaos will ensue from there.
Yeah, that's insane. I guess I didn't hear about that. I mean, that just seems like something that at that point the federal government would get involved with, or like, I guess, I was thinking like you could bring it to a federal court just to even dispute. But I guess I imagine that once it's already happened, I doubt this guy's like really just like, I want to ruin the mother of my child's life. It's like, I just wanted to stop it.
Right.
It's just, I don't know how you could look at a father and, well, or even just a mother who in the same situation, like look at either of them and not respect what both of them want. Like,
I guess in this scenario though, if and I've seen this case, and she's like, this lady's also a pediatrician who was his ex-wife. So part of the arguments too they've been even having is the fact that he thinks because she can't produce medical documents that she herself is the one behind the counter prescribing him this kind of gender hormone stuff. And so like he's got a couple extra reasons to believe that she's being even extra nefarious on top of the outside kind of sentimental value of just not transitioning children. And it's actually, it's great that we even had this little discussion beforehand because, and I can bring it here too. This will be the first thing I'm going to put on screen. Actually, I'm going to go ahead and actually share this over. Let me find it here because this was a recent thing that went viral. It's not this one. It's this one. So I don't know if you can see that on screen now. So this is from Leading Report. So this is actually crazy because it came from Russia, and Alex Jones even brought it up too. Putin signs a decree providing the ability for foreigners to apply for temporary residence if they want to escape their destructive neoliberal country and embrace Russia's more traditional values. Now, obviously, Putin didn't say this because he saw Jeff Younger's story. Putin said this because he's seen the overwhelming amount of degradation that's occurred in West Wing values and in the Western world. And I think that he probably sees that Russia may be one of the last bastions of like a very Orthodox Christian country. Jeff Younger actually had some great points, and he recorded a video while he was hiking, and I actually have that on screen too. I'll actually go ahead and put it over here because I think we should actually watch this. And it's him taking a hike through the woods, and it's him giving some of his ideas regarding what he would do if he were starting a family all over again based on his current track of what he's been going through with his life. And so I think it's saddening for one, because even when I think of this, it's like I don't want to abandon my homeland, but even I can see the writing on the wall where if Christians are already a minority in the Republican Party and seemingly getting smaller and smaller, I mean, what direction do you really expect most of this to go? I only expect it to honestly get much worse from here,
Yeah.
especially when you do have things like Trump disavowing Project 2025 and wanting nothing to do with what people all consider to be the far right, which is essentially just people who want to be abolitionists, right? The Christian wing who are like want nothing to do with abortion, and those are just some of the side issues as well. But I'm going to go ahead. Let me change this here. I'll switch over the screen because this little bit from Jeff Younger I think is super eye-opening, if not just outright saddening. Now we'll go here with a summary. Not the summary, some of the what was it, the takeaways here, which is this: Russia's opening up this asylum program for people fleeing Western countries due to perceived degenerate Western values. So he also talks about there's other countries doing the same, but this is his advice. So we'll go ahead and play it here.
Jeff Younger.
Actually, move back to the beginning, make sure the sound's okay. We'll play this in its
Howdy.
entirety.
Jeff Younger. I'm just taking a walk on a trail here. It's about 108 degrees. I'm in Texas for a few days. Getting a reminder of what it's like living here. Been in California for a while. You know, today I just posted a really interesting link to the Russian Foreign Ministry. And they're opening up an asylum program for people fleeing Western countries because of degenerate Western values. And I thought, man, that is a trend that you could easily see accelerating. You know, Russia is a unabashedly Orthodox Christian country. It has like 40% church attendance rates on Sunday. It's bringing its birth rate back up to replacement rate, and it's really emphasizing marriage. And they have a lot of great programs for people who are willing to, you know, put their industriousness to work for the economy. In the eastern parts of Russia, you can get tons of land if you're just willing to put it into productive use. So that's something that, you know, people who know how to farm, people who know how to do minerals extraction, people who have oil skills and work in the oil industry, tradesmen who can, you know, keep factories going. I think they can make a pretty good living there. And I'll tell you one thing you're not going to have to worry about in Russia, and that's having your kid's balls cut off in a transgender surgery. Some of you may know I've been fighting for 10 years to stop my son from being castrated. Now I'm fighting in the California courts. They're trying to block my son's puberty and give him cross-sex hormones, which is going to sterilize him. So that's not going to happen in Russia. If we were in Russia, that would never happen. My sons will be safe. And in fact, my ex-wife, who's trying to do this, would be in a Siberian prison at hard labor. You know, so there's really something to think about here. Now, there's other countries. You know, a lot of people on my timeline have posted about Hungary and Poland. I would also add to that list Serbia. You know, if you think about it, there are countries where traditional Western Christian values still exist. Now, admittedly and ironically, these Western Christian values are being maintained in countries that follow Eastern Christianity. And I don't think that's an accident. One of the problems with Western Christianity is that in the case of the Roman Catholics, it attempted a kind of pan-nationalistic monarchy over the church. And in the case of the Protestants, it simply went into theological dissipation with no source of authority at all. But the Eastern Orthodox churches have always been based as national churches. And at the same time, they maintain doctrinal integrity. And they do that through church councils, which have authority. So I think there is something to the way that the Eastern Europeans have practiced Christianity that has allowed them to preserve things through communism, frankly, through the worst oppression, worse than what we're going through. in America, worse than what's going on in Europe or the UK. They were able to preserve traditional Christian ways of life even through communism and brutal oppression. Some of you might say, well, I'd have to give up my guns. Well, most of these countries, you don't actually have to give up your guns. Don't forget, Hungary overthrew its government several times. Serbia, Croatia, Bosnia Herzegovina. These people in the 20th century, they overthrew their government. Romania overthrew their government. Russia overthrew the Soviet system. These are places in the world where the spirit of revolt against tyranny is still alive. So I think for a lot of people, not everybody, but a lot of people would be able to make a happy Christian home in Hungary, Poland, Serbia, Russia.
So I'll stop it there before we finish out, because I want to get your opinion right now. Like, just on those kind of premises that he laid out right there, what are your thoughts when you think about how there may be a more Christian traditional presenting life in other places than the United States? Does that not honestly, like, on its face, doesn't it sound kind of ridiculous to think that America
okay. I didn't know how you were going to go about it. I thought it was. I personally was like, that sounds completely anti-Christian. Are we not supposed to spread the word to people that are like, I feel like being in America, if you really feel like it's a country where, Christian values aren't as upheld as normal, then this is where you would want to spread your message. Like, we don't need an island of Christians. That doesn't make sense to me.
Well, I guess from the way he's saying it, though, is because in America, since your kids aren't really your own kids, really, the state kind of owns you, essentially, anything to do with family court as well. I think his advice is actually for a family wanting to flourish and have the best chance to focus on things such as salvation, because even in those countries, right, like in Hungary and Serbia, they're not 100%, Christian. He was talking about how the church attendance is 40%.
Yeah.
So I understand your point with, shouldn't we be here? Shouldn't we be here and stay here and fight the fight? And that's where I'm at too. And so I think these are the words from a man who's been devastatingly hurt by living through this experience with his kids.
It's a little different.
That he sees right. And so he sees the value in, like, I should have done this. Like, I wouldn't be living this experience right now if I would have done this earlier. Had this been offered to me earlier. I think it is something to think about. And I think specifically because you already don't need a movement for men to leave the country. Everybody talks about MGTOW, right? Which is men going their own way. Now that's kind of more of a red pill movement, but you have to imagine that there is a group of men in that movement that's Christian or at least Christian leaning. So if you're not familiar, MGTOW. So it's MGTOW. And you see like those captions plastered everywhere on like some kind of feminist thing. And you see men have it in their bios now because it's like a growing movement, which is guys who are entirely not participating in dating in the American market anymore. It's them kind of being fed up with what is the feminist woke virus that's kind of taken over and catapulted things. And I think he does make a good point. I'm on the fence on this one, to be honest. Now, I'm personally, like, I mean, my personal argument is like, no, I'm sitting here and fighting here. Like, this is my homeland. But my objective opinion, if you were to ask me, like, what advice should I give someone else? I'm at the point where I'm like, I don't really know. I don't know what the better option would be. Mm-hmm. I mean, I think that there's definitely true value in defending the homeland. But I think if you were dead set on wanting to ensure that you had a Christian family that could flourish with little to no challenge from the government, taking your kids or forcing you to go through some kind of thing that would put your faith to the test, then I think it is probably worthwhile to look into things such as, Hungary, Russia, Serbia, Poland. I do understand your argument though, which is like, like the mission is supposed to be what it is. But I think even in that, right, we spend more time sending missionaries, especially among, Protestant churches, to other countries than we do here in the States. Yeah. And I think that's a huge problem in and of itself too. It's like, what do you mean you need to go to Kenya? Bro, go down the street.
Like, well, yeah, but I honestly do feel like it's like I believe, I could be wrong. I'm still, learning in Christianity, but I believe like one of the prophecies to be fulfilled is like, hey, Abigail, One of the prophecies to be fulfilled is like spread, like the message reaches the entirety of the world. And I know there's like plenty of places where people haven't had a chance to actually hear about it. And then when it comes to here, I mean, I can't even lie to you. Like my perception of Christians is still very jaded, even though I've like, feel like I've been confidently a Christian for like the past year. But even when I see like streetwalkers, just like the street preachers,
Yeah. Yeah.
it feels like I'm like this doesn't feel like the right way to reach people. It's like aggressive almost. It feels like an aggressive salesman trying to sell you on something.
I think I do agree with that point. And I'm not even gonna sit here and be like somebody who's like, and this is how you evangelize, right?
Mhm.
As much, as much studied as I've become with the theology of things, I also agree with that point. Like, I think, but here's what I'll say where I think it's effective, because I am someone who watches a lot of things like Wretched Radio, and he's someone who's one of these people who do a lot to speak out in public, and especially do things like public debates type stuff. I think it's not maybe even in the moment of what's going on, but it could be by proxy of the fact when they record, when he gets like a good like sound bit of someone bringing up a point and then him kind of blowing it away, that content then being put somewhere on the web could reach somebody. And I think even if you look at it in the macro sense, if he's out there all day, I think even if one person was to think a little bit differently, whether he talked to 4,000 people or 10,000 people, I think it's still got value in and of itself.
Yeah.
Even if it's one person at a time, because every soul and every person is valuable. You have Abigail saying it's hard to have a definitive stance on Christianity in today's world because it's so jaded from its true message and use it a virtue signal for some. And that's very true. I always rail on this all the time on my show, which is that, everyone's version of Christianity is actually more so just cultural Christianity, which is, be nice. It's essentially, Jesus said, be nice. Done. You read the Bible. Like, that's it, guys. Like, and it's so far removed from that. It's so different. People don't even make the mistakes of thinking things like, Jesus even flipped tables, right? Jesus mocked people. There's many times where he calls people like, you are a den of vipers. Right? Forgive me. Multiple instances like this, right, where he's calling people out. Christianity has its edges, but where we are in today's society, all of those edges are seemingly removed, and we're kind of operating with a soft-handed version of it, and so that's why it's kind of weak, right? It has no teeth to sink into anything. But it becomes very apparent, when it's up against the opposing thing, which is generally what we see, which is evil, which is generally purported by most of the rest of our culture.
Mhm.
I guess asking you, somebody who hasn't, and not to put you on blast here, someone who's been in the faith for what you said, like about a year.
I would say like confident faith, yeah, for about a year.
Okay, and I guess even when you hear this though, you think that this idea is a little too far out there, right? Like you probably wouldn't even think about moving to a different country to start a family.
No.
Yeah.
No,
I
like I've heard it before. It's like it's the classic argument with all politics. Like, oh, you don't like the president, or like, oh, as soon as this person's elected, everyone should move to Canada. I remember that with when Trump got elected, and I'm just like, that's just not the answer.
I
Yeah,
know, but that's all the leftists being like, and then they never do. And
no,
nobody ever actually leaves. They just get angrier and more insane, to be honest, with most of this.
it's
But I do
just
want to
like,
go and play the rest of this out, though, because I think he's actually going to touch on the fact that a little bit more of the specifics here in America and why he thinks this.
yeah,
And it's something that I think more Americans really need to think about. I'm too old, really. I've got 2 boys here in the United States that I have to fight for. I've got to duke it out right here. But if I was starting out again, knowing what I know now, I'll tell you what, I think I'd probably get out of the United States to start a family, because it's just not safe to start a family here. Your kids don't really belong to you. If you don't trans your kids in a lot of states, they'll take your kids away from you. The schools will indoctrinate them into values that you abhor. And frankly, for a lot of men, half of men are going to lose their kids in divorce. So, I think that there is an argument for doing something different, going someplace else, and integrating into a traditional Orthodox Christian community, which includes both the work life, the social life, the community of the people in small villages, and in the church life. So I just wanted to pass on my views on this. I could see this trend really picking up, and I could see young men in particular really desiring this. Take care.
I do think he's got a point. I'm especially because MGTOW's already a thing. I could see this reaching
What does it stand
another
for
level.
again?
Men going their own way. That's what it stands for.
Okay.
And the reason being, and the reason why I say that is because if MGTOW already exists as a movement, and that's just a reactionary movement because like men hate women, right? Or really it's just because men don't want to pick or even worry about the pool of women that exists in America, generally just because of feminism. Then I think when you give them a actual kind of righteous reason like that, where it's like, if you were to pick on a table, right? Like say it's NCAA and you're picking your colleges, and it's like, well, at this one place, it's like you're gonna have the best chance. You're gonna be like the starter here. You're gonna have no worries about anything. There's gonna be way less concerns. It's all green lights. Where it's like, the position in America is like going to Ohio State. It's like you're gonna be fourth string. You're gonna have to wait for about 4 other guys to be with her. You're gonna have to you have to deal with this. You're gonna have to deal with this. I think it's like when you look at it, even just like trying to lay out pros and cons, it's hard to like go against what he's saying outside of the singular aspect of just like, abandoning your homeland and fighting for what's here in this country. And I think that is a very valuable argument. And I think that's one that kind of keeps me pinned in the fact that where I think we got to fight here, right? We got to do our best to actually rein everything in and prevent what it's been becoming.
Yeah, and I'm not like too afraid of that, to be honest with you. I do feel for him because obviously like that situation sounds like a nightmare, and I really would never want that to happen to me. But I am on the side where I'm like, if it's really that big a deal to you, you can just homeschool your kids, because then you don't allow schools to teach them something that you abhor, like you said. And then you also get to give them a chance at kind of still deciding their own fate, because it almost feels like if you surround people obviously with a bunch of others that think just like you, it feels like you're not really giving them a chance at like free will to like go out and figure things out for themselves. But I feel like if you homeschool here, you still have that control over them up till the age of 18. And then when they're 18, at that point, like if my kid wanted to be trans at 18, I'd be like, well, damn. I mean, that's the way it goes. But like, I'm still gonna love you. It's just I'm not gonna allow something like that to happen before the age of 18. And I just want to give them. I think the stricter you are, just at least with people I knew in high school. I mean, the more strict you are, the just less your kids are gonna want to be like you.
Well, I think that you're right in that aspect in the general. I think there's a way to be strict that's valuable. I think more often than not, what's end up happening is because parents will be strict, and then it goes to because I told you so.
Yes.
And then that's not a valuable. I mean, Matt Walsh would say otherwise, but I kind of disagree with him there. I think that's the strict kind of value setting that will make your child want to act out against you. Because most children are already in the power dynamic of like, there's nothing I can do. This person can throw me across the room. So to even add it on top of that even there's no value in the child putting forth any amount of sentiment, and you can shut it down with because I told you so.
Mhm.
Well, then there is no conversation even happening. It's like you're not even entertaining the fact that your child needs to understand or get an education from you about these things. And then you combine that with everybody understands the average school day for a child is absolute worthless, right? It's essentially maybe a good hour or two of work, and the rest of the day is them kind of being suffocated by bullying or sitting at a computer doing nothing, bad substitute teachers, yada yada, outside of even being surrounded by other kind of degenerate garbage.
Yeah.
So I think if you were to be strict in a way that was to lay out values, but you explain to them, right, you explained to them and you took them to church and you had even other people teach them, right? And it's part of the community. And I think that's even a very more necessary aspect where even outsourcing from the parents themselves, you take kids to Sunday school, and this is going to be, this is our Sunday school teacher, Mrs. Nice Face. And like she comes in and she helps and she teaches things too. And then you kind of surround that and you box it in by the entire, not even just community, but the culture your kid's surrounded by all speaks to these values. It's not going to be seen as strict. I think the issue becomes, and it's exactly following in line with what we just saw in Jeff Younger, where if you're strict with a child and you say, hey, no, you can't do this. Hey, you can't do this. But that kid's friend, Billy and Jim and Freddie, all have iPhones and game tablets at the age of 7 years old. They'll feel like they're just being unfairly treated with no understanding of why the strictness comes into play because you're not doing a good enough job by backing it up. But then I think that changes though if you raise your child in Russia or you raise them in Serbia, you raise them in Hungary, and it is the culture of the area is more Western Christian values, even though they do practice Eastern Orthodoxy, Eastern Christianity. I think you have way less of that, right? Because their influences, even outside of the parents, aren't direct antithetical to what you're teaching them. And that's why I think you do get these like kind of like rubber band snap moments where we see it all the time. Pastor's daughter hits 18 and she's in a porno video 2 days later. It's like it's like that. But I think it's because the culture that surrounds it, they feel like they're in this weird bubble that's unfairly treating them. And when you don't do enough to kind of back up what you're teaching them, they're so keen to jump out of that and try these things that's surrounding them and the culture.
Yeah. And I totally understand what you're getting at. And like, it's definitely, you have a way better shot on Russia than today. I mean, that's like kind of hard to argue. Maybe. Who knows though? I don't live in Russia, so I don't know what the government's like at all. But what I do want to say is like, I didn't mean to come off as like you shouldn't be strict with your child, because obviously I don't feel that way. But I do feel like the having like chores and goals that are set for your child is really important, because then they grow to understand what it feels like to achieve a goal. And then they also have, doing chores just also gets them used to when you're living on your own, like there's stuff you have to maintain and it doesn't feel like an issue because you had chores. I was going to say the way actually that my dad had raised me is he'd tell me exactly, he'd be like, you can go do this. There's actually a story of a hot pan. I feel like I've told this before on a different show, or maybe I just told you. But
Okay,
but
yeah.
he was like,
It sounds familiar.
yeah, he was he was like cooking an egg on a pan just in the kitchen, and I was like, oh, can I like touch that? And he's like, yeah, sure, go ahead. It's really hot though. It's gonna burn you. And he was like, but go ahead. And I was like, no, I don't want to do that. And he's like, yeah, that's right. he never told me I couldn't do anything. He just told me the
He
consequence.
baited you.
He was like, well, obviously he would have stopped me before I touched it. But it's the whole premise of like, or maybe he wouldn't have, I don't know.
Right.
But the whole premise of it is that he was describing exactly what would happen if I did that, like the consequence of the action, but still allowing me to decide it. And when I got in trouble growing up all throughout high school, I made a bunch of mistakes and I got in trouble with the police. And whenever I saw my dad in those situations, I mean, I never once did I feel like I got an unfair punishment. Like I was surprised that he was upset with me, because I knew full well what the consequence was of my action. And I took that risk and I was like, basically just, like, okay, well, I'm going to take the risk because I want this, small reward. But obviously if I get caught, the risk is so much higher than the reward. So
it's you thinking I can pull this off. I got this, dude. I'm not going to get
caught. I was like, well, I mean, eventually I got to get it down, right? Like I just have to come up with a skill about it.
But I think that's spot on, just the way that you described it, right? Which like he didn't say like no, And then you ask why, and he says, because I told you so. He literally said, he was like, you can, but I don't think that you want to, and here's why.
Mhm.
Right. And it's like, obviously it's not a very complex issue. It's just like, that's hot. Don't touch it. You're gonna burn your hands. I think you can stretch that to multiple other avenues, especially when it's relating to like Christian ethics or any kind of really other issue of disciplinary things like screen time, right? Like, why can't I have a thing at this time? And it's like, well, it's like you can't, because if you do this and this, you're going to end up like this. You're going to develop issues with your eyes. Your attention span's going to go down. Your dopamine's going to go down. And then you can explain it to be like, and then if you don't have an iPad, it's like you're going to feel depressed because you're going to be addicted to this thing. You're going to be addicted to what it does to your brain. There's all these different ways you could probably explain these things, doing better so than just saying, I told you so.
Mhm.
And I think, and I'm not trying to misrepresent Matt Walsh, but I think his argument is more so that, because I told you so just develops an authoritative kind of respect, where it's like, if you just say, because I told you so, it's like, okay, whatever this guy says
Well,
goes.
and then you have the do as I say, not as I do people. And you're just
Right.
like, how do you expect them to respect you at all?
Right, especially when you say like, oh, you can't do this, and then that parent goes out and is smoking a cigarette on the front porch, and then they're ripping and they're like dumping a 40. It's like, okay, like, I guess, like, it's like, but it's like, that would make me jaded, right? It's like, you don't even follow anything, and like, you don't have any kind of discipline or conviction to hold yourself to some kind of
Mhm.
standard. The kid sees right through that, and you know how smart kids can be, especially when they're like 6, 7, 8 years old, and they're observing all these examples, they're watching different movies and stuff. Like, these ideas can come to them, earlier on than we expect, and so they can pick up on trends with parents too.
So quick. I've seen it firsthand.
Yeah. Well, I wanted to take it, actually, go ahead and segue, kind of a harder segue here, which is, I don't know if you've actually seen this, because we're speaking of Matt Walsh. It made me think of this, and I have it right here. I'm gonna go ahead and pull it up on screen on my end, and then I'll share it over here if I can find it. There we go.
Just realized
So this is the new Matt Walsh movie. I don't know if you have seen this or not. Any trailer for it yet, at least? But what is it called? What is a woman? Did you see that at all?
Yes, I actually I think I remember you sending this to me and saying, but I haven't actually seen any of the movie. I've just seen like maybe this trailer potentially.
I think the one that I covered was an actual another clip from it. This is actually the full blown trailer.
Okay. Oh, I haven't seen this.
No, yeah, I just want to get your first thoughts on it and what it means for the culture. We'll move into a bit more racial stuff here.
Yeah.
It should be playing. Yeah.
Let's be clear what's happening in this country. It's Nazism. Republicans are Nazis. You cannot separate yourselves from the bad white people.
Growing up in the 90s, I never thought much about race. Sure, you noticed, but never really seemed to matter that much, at least not to me.
Being a white, straight, cisgender man, it's the top of the pile.
I'm on the top of the pile. That's me. Am I racist?
I would really appreciate it if you left.
I'm trying to learn. I'm on this journey.
Can you please leave?
If I'm going to sort this out, I need to go deeper undercover. If I want to be an ally, I need to look like one.
What is racism?
Martin Luther King said not to judge people by the
Martin Luther King said a lot of stuff.
Is America inherently racist?
What the hell is that?
The word inherent is challenging there. America is racist to its bones. All of the...
So inherently.
Yeah. The entire system has to burn. And I'm not going to even use save this country. This country is not worth saving. This country is a piece of shit.
Oh, sorry. Sorry.
They gonna say I'm racist.
Joining us now is Matt, certified DEI expert.
Here's my certification. Where are you guys in your anti-racist journeys? So I'll look around the room and point to who we believe is the most racist person in the room. We want to rename the George Washington Monument to the George Floyd Monument. Would you mind signing it? You will? What do you think about this issue of heteronormativity and how it intersects with the broader structures of racism in society?
They gonna say I'm racist.
What's up with white people? What are you doing to decenter your whiteness?
Who's making it the center? Why are they doing that?
What you're doing is you're stretching out of your whiteness. This is more for you in this field. White.
Folks,
White.
trash,
White supremacy.
white woman, white boy,
White.
entitlement,
White.
centering, white silence.
Is there a black person around here? There's a black person right here. Does he not exist?
They gon' say I'm racist, but they call everybody racist.
Hi, Robin.
Hi. And what's your name?
I'm Matt.
Matt. Hi,
Yeah.
Matt.
Nice to meet you.
Just had to ask who you are because you have to be careful.
Never be too careful.
They gon' say you racist, but they call everybody racist.
So I'm obviously excited for that movie. I think it'll be good.
That actually looks pretty interesting to watch. Like it
So it's
didn't
supposed to-
feel obviously there's a message that he's trying to send with it. But it didn't feel like too biased.
So it's supposed to be like a comedy documentary style thing. Now, you
Almost
might
like
have already seen that
Borat.
video I made. Yeah, right. Very similar to that, where I'm assuming they have like all these kind of licenses beforehand and they kind of set things up and like key in the people who are supposed to like know before they set some of these events up. I think they probably do them like under the guise of like, Gender Company LLC or something like that. So like nobody really kind of even questions stuff when they are doing some work to set this up. And I think What Is Woman was very what's the right word? Not generational. I mean it was phenomenal. But it was very, very powerful to the point where it changed the conversation. I think once What Is Woman began to come out, that's when you saw the political spectrum begin to shift a little bit further to the right regarding all of the hormone surgery, as well as just the absurd nature of the they them kind of pronouns. Because there for a bit it was like, I mean, you didn't obey with that, right? You'd be getting kicked off of Xbox, you'd get kicked off of Reddit of all places, you'd be getting kicked off of social media, especially before X was owned by Elon Musk. I'm wondering what level of significance this may have regarding race, if it's in that same light. Now, I think that race is much more of a golden child than this kind of gender crap is for the rest of the world. So on its face, I think it'll be funny and hilarious and everyone's going to laugh at it, but I still think it's not going to have the impact that What Is Woman had, even though it's still going to kind of pick at the absurdity of these things. And the reason why is I'll put this other one on screen here too, because this interaction was just like, picture perfect. See if I can switch screens here. I don't know if I put it on here. So if you look at this interaction here, you can see this girl. She's I don't know what she is really, but it's this black woman. She says, "I love being black." Jake Shields quotes it and says, "I love being white." She quotes it again and says, "He's a white supremacist."
Man,
I mean, they've taken it so far to the extreme that you are not, as a white individual, allowed to be proud of your heritage, your country, who you are innately as a person, and you're not allowed to, for one, recognize any kind of racial realism differences in white individuals, but you're supposed to respect everything that's Afrocentric and praise black anything. Now, this goes to other regions too, but I think it's more inherently for America, it's more white versus black. That kind of dynamic is the one that kind of takes the cake when it comes to overall kind of references, especially in pop culture. It's laughable, dude. It is absurd, to say the least. Now, obviously, it's a little bit harder to crack the egg open of the absurdity here than it is with gender ideology. But hopefully it can begin to at least take a pickaxe to what this stuff is. And maybe we can see white individuals begin to feel a bit more prideful and feel less like they need to pay homage of some sort or always take the back seat. And one of these examples too, you think of like, I think Uber ran this promotion where it's like you go in Uber and it's like, what are the sections? And it's like, oh, there's Chinese food, there's pizza, there's burgers, and then there's black owned businesses. Right. And it's like this entire section dedicated to supporting specifically black owned, would you call it just business venture? At least that's my hope. So I want to hear what your thoughts are on just the racial dynamics in this country, as well as what you think of just what this instance is here on this image here.
Yeah. So first I'll start with like how I feel it is within the country. In my personal experience, I just don't encounter the only people that I encounter like this are white people. And it's like, it feels like It honestly, and I hate generalizing. I really do, because I think it just leads to, obviously, end up in some sort of way, you end up being racist or sexist in some way. But like whenever I hear arguments like this, like, well, you can't love being white, or you're a white supremacist. Like, in my experience, the people I've met that say that type of stuff are all white. And then with all of the people that are not white, and I just mean everyone that is not white, everyone that I know is not concerned about race at all. And then I think it's even further when you go into the church, and like everyone I know that is Christian does, like, there's tons, obviously, tons of liberal people, but they don't carry around that mindset of like any sort of superiority or any need to feel like they are above anyone else or that they deserve more. Because you can't really argue that you should be compensated for something that you didn't go through, and then that we should be put down because of everything we've had throughout history. Because if you're taking it from an atheist perspective, like those people are gone. Those people are gone forever. The only people that matter now are the people alive, right? Mm-hmm. And those are the people that didn't live in that era. Didn't live in an era where things were like, even slavery. Like but that still does happen in other countries. I think when it comes to a post like this, I see it a lot too. And obviously it's just upsetting, because I don't see why you feel the need to put other people down like it somehow puts you up, because it doesn't. In fact, it like for the people that actually do care about equality and care about racism, like this kind of post, those people hate. Those people are like, well, you're the reason that I can't get anywhere. We can't get anywhere. It's because you take it to an extreme. Like, most people just want equality. Everyone just wants to be treated fairly. But then you have people like this that's like, okay, you clearly don't want equality. You just want to be recognized. And it goes into identity politics, which is what everyone seems to be so concerned about at this moment.
Well, yeah, I think from a multitude of things there.
Yeah.
The first being is, I think this argument, what you see here, right, is she's allowed to be okay with who she is, right? She's allowed to say on the internet, and I say allowed to as in like it's the correct opinion from, social media and the social status. But any amount of the same person who's of white origin saying the same thing, it goes right to superiority. Right. So I think that takes away the fact that, like, I can't be proud of who I am. Like, just by saying that means that I think I'm better than someone else. It's like, where does that connection come in? And why is that the most immediate connection that's made? That's the one that kind of bothers me is we have to understand too, right? Like, when we look at culture, right, who built Rome? Right. It was like,
okay. I thought that was
no, I was just being rhetorical. And you go, and you look at the great Taj Mahal and places over in the Middle Eastern areas. It's like, these are all different specific sects of culture, right? And so it's like, when I'm saying, like, people want to say, like, I'm proud of this or I'm proud of this, like, yeah, there is some kind of like, people look at these things and they go, yeah, I am proud of these things, right? Like, I am proud that I come from this and this. Like, I take honor in this. And then to go right to the, oh, you're a supremacist, is just like, it's like, what? Especially when it's from the other way around. The person goes, I love being black. You're expected, if you're white, to go, yeah, dude, definitely go you, man. Right? It's like this, it's just this broken nature. And I think this overriding sentiment that it kind of exists in society, period, is this anti-white sentiment. And, I think this is exemplified. P&W Gorilla had a phenomenal video he put out, which was a compilation of ads. And it's about a 4 minute long video. And every single frame of this video is a different advertisement. And in every single one of these, it stems across things like fitness, to makeup, to Hollywood, to things like gas station ads, to things like, furniture ads. And in every single one of these, it is a black man pictured with a white woman going alongside with the demoralization aspect, which is nonstop subconscious symbology being put from the ages of like 2014 all the way until now, if not even before then, of nonstop subconscious symbology. Now you see these things in Hollywood as well. It's supported and social reinforced with movies, right? Like the lead actors of Men. I think people put out this post all the time. It's like, can you find me a movie that's the lead character is white, competent, has a wife, loves his family, loves his kids, and it's like name like all these qualities, right? And it's like there are none. It's like everyone has to fit this mold. That combined with what we talked about earlier with the men going their own way, I think supports a lot of why, especially white men, are at a disparticipation rate of almost 40%. White men in the last couple of I think it's like 4 years or 5 years, aren't going to college at a rate of like 40%. Like it's like this huge number. It's this huge drop off. And I can only imagine that those numbers are supported by the fact that you have so many sentiments fighting against that, right? Now you even take this, and you can take this even to a more niche area, which is things of like pornographic material. And you can see that there are these specific bends that lean against white men and are pro-black. Now, all of this combined, though, makes these sentiments, and it bubbles up underneath. And I think that's when you do see maybe one-off instances of some white guy finally losing it and being like, okay, I don't want to live like this anymore, dude. This is insane. And it's like, I don't want to have to combat every single step of the way, feel these specific kinds of ways, and go on and go forward. Now you can view things and be like, yeah, we can all be equal, while also being individually grateful for your backgrounds and who you are. Those things can be entirely mutually exclusive. The way they've turned it into the fact that any white man who says it is an automatic hate crime almost, is I think the reason why it's getting worse. Like, you can't put the genie back in the bottle now. And now that you have this kind of broken idea of what you brought up earlier, which is reparations, and now there's like this kind of expected idea that people who were born, like 7-8 years ago are going to be then given some kind of tax break, while white individuals take on a tax burden when they never owned slaves, and so on and so forth. Exactly what you had said, making, children pay for their father's crimes, is outright insane. So it's, in some way, you're going to have to get back that. You're going to have to walk that rhetoric back in some kind of public form, or this only gets worse. This only goes into further and further and further extremes, especially when you see on the freest platform, which is X, the discourse is getting insane. It is so racial, and it's because a lot of it's led by broken ideas. A lot of it's led by just modern day thinking and what that's meant to be, and what people are expected, especially in terms of like entitlements and convenience.
Mm-hmm.
I really don't see any way out of it outside of trying to bring Christian ethics and frameworks back into the mainstream. And the bad thing is there, though, is even as somebody like me who follows a lot of people who are just, in the theological field, who might not even be Christian, there's even war happening between black pastors and white pastors. It's gotten to that level, and it's disheartening, because it's like what I said earlier, it's like Pandora's box. Like, I don't think these things can get walked back without something very, very radical occurring at the level of like a presidential election, where some president is elected and he's like, I'm a Christian nationalist. He's like, and this is what we're going to do. He's like, we're going to put the New Testament back in school. He's like, get this stupid, get this homosexual garbage out of here. We're not even going to pay attention to this. He's like, we're going to get the economy back on track. Ford, if you build one more factory in Mexico, you're never going to have a factory here again, and like taking like these hardcore stances that are like actually nationalistic, non-outsourcing, non-beneficial foreign aid programs. I mean, otherwise, I think it's just picking between fast decline or slow decline.
Mhm.
And that's kind of where I'm at with everything.
Yeah, and I understand your viewpoint. I think it's fair to be there. Like the one thing I always try to make sure is that like I'm not letting my emotions or feelings kind of dictate or like end up being like the opposite, because like I don't really feel like it's a war that it is. I think some people are just confused, and I think that's really where it comes. Like when it comes down to it, I've always been of the belief, like if I've met people who didn't go through as much stuff as I did, but like it doesn't really matter. And like also how can you compare that, because someone's always got it worse in the world. Except for that one guy who's just got it really terrible.
Yeah, somebody's got the shortest stick,
Someone's
right?
just living the worst life. But like when it comes down to that, I never judge anyone else's problems or like belittle them, no matter how, even if it's just like something small. I try not to make sure, or I try to make sure that they're not feeling like it doesn't matter. But the point is, like when I do come and approach that issue, I'm always like, well, let's like find a solution. Or if there's no solution, it's like, well, you got to find some way to heal from it. And not like let's retaliate, or like you need to go do something just terrible just to like, I don't know, make yourself feel better because you deserve it.
Right,
And that's
right.
I think that's what comes from what our society pushes now. And I think it really has a lot to do with like I know we've talked about it before too, but everyone having these individualistic behaviors where they're so self-centered and their world doesn't really stretch outside of their home. And it's just like, and really, I mean, social media is what gives the biggest shit talkers the platform, because hate speech probably the easiest way to blow up and get famous. Like if you say something just outrageous, I mean, I see it all the time. Like people just post a video and they're like, "Ha, this dumb woman. Men are so much better." And I'm like, I already know what you're doing. You don't actually think that. I'm like, you just know you're gonna get 1,000 comments, people battling each other in the comments, and then you're gonna get, it's gonna get more and more seen, and then next thing you know, you just post another video that's like not anything to do with that. And it's like your own content that you want to get pushed, and then you can just delete that other video because you've already got the algorithm now working in your favor.
Yeah.
But I think it really comes down to that. Like I think it's just these people on social media make everything seem so much worse than it is. I know you may not feel that way. I know like you think it's like a big issue, and it may be bigger than I know because I try not to be on social media and listen to it. Obviously I still try to listen to the news and keep up with the happenings of the world. But as far as like social media, I've been lessening myself from watching it more and more because I realize it's so easy to just like get stuck on videos where you just get pissed off and you're like, it's like, and I'm like, I at least have the composure to like step away and be like, calm down. Like that's like rage baiting stuff.
Yeah.
But I'm like, if I just watch this all the time, like I might be racist too. Like I just
Right.
stuff like that. And then like suppressing certain news stories just to make people feel like things aren't equal. I know that happens all the time.
Well, that's the reason where I was going to take it to, which is, for me, it's less so the, because I get called a racist and a Nazi all the time. It's like, that's every other day.
I know you and I know the people we hang out with, and I just know that's not true.
Right, exactly. And the poor thing with it though is that there is a suppression, and it is on one specific side of the aisle. there is a suppression of just how much violent crime is committed by one specific population. I've seen many, many, many police reports that go that like you see it's like, what's the race? White. And you look at the photo and you're like, bro, like it's like you can't, who are you fooling, dude? You know, and this isn't even to go just to the black community. I mean, there's been instances of Hispanics and illegals, and it's like white, right? There is hardcore suppression on some of these instances. You see it even when it goes to like illegal immigration as well. You've seen this recent story where it's like, you know, they caught this guy here even after it was proved that he was assaulting this person, and then he got released, and next thing you know, he's doing it 2 weeks later to this individual, right? But you know, as a white individual, were you to do anything of the like, your life is over. And so I think over and over and over again, it's that at the large scale, which is the way that it's kind of suppressed. I mean, you see people talk about this all the time. It's like 3 young scholars like did this, and you look at the photo, and it's guys wearing ski masks, and they're going in with Dracos, and they just killed a store owner. And it's like, dude, it's like, and then they'll be using these photos that's like of 9 years ago when they were in 6th grade, and it's like, oh, like these poor scholars, like they just had a bad time. That's why they killed that guy who owned the business. And it's like, come on, dude. It's like, come on, man. It's like you're kind of playing dumb. And then I think you take that, pair it with the top end rhetoric, pair it with also the social media nonsense, and then you have everything going on. And people, for some people, it's like it's too much. They can't look away. And I think the reason you see this exhibit is Kamala Harris. You have people who are literally going to vote for her knowing, and she has no policies. And I don't know if you know this, but if you go to Tim Walz Harris website right now, they have no policies. There is not a single policy listed on their entire presidential page.
They don't need it.
Because
Biden got in office, and that guy's completely had no ability to think.
Right.
So that makes total sense.
With Biden, it's slightly different because people are just voting against Trump. Like they're like anyone but him.
Yeah.
You know, anyone but him. With now the new one is we're voting for her. We're voting for her. They're voting purely because she's a woman. Some of them voting because she's a black woman. So it's identity politics reaching a whole new high. Everything is surface level, and she's literally copied the last like multiple policy statements that the Trump campaign has put out. So, you know, you have JD Vance saying he wants to raise the child tax credit break for families when they have kids from $2,000 to $5,000. 2 days later, Kamala Harris goes, we'll do $6,000. Donald Trump sits here and he goes, you know, we're going to do no tax on tips. A couple weeks later, Kamala Harris goes, we're not taxing tips. Even though Kamala Harris, while she was serving as the VP, was the tiebreaker on a bill that involved taxing on tips, and she voted against it.
Mm-hmm.
It just shows that they have no substance, right? Like this is really what the left is. The left is all entirely no substance.
Well,
their values are fleeting, and they run and operate purely on identity politics. They run on the fact that people won't read past the headline, and as long as that headline reads, man, wow, this person said this to Trump, they go, man, yeah, that's great. And they don't read anything else, right?
They have enough of a following at this point to where that they know full well whatever they want to peddle on social media or on the news, they can immediately make people, the majority of people, do exactly what they want. And I think it's really proven when you think about all of these areas where you see like anyone that's like low income, or just like you're saying, like any black person that's getting shot by police or doing like gang violence. All of those are heavy Democratic cities. There's like no mixed cities that are like, there's no like Republican Democrat cities. These are all Democratic cities.
Yeah,
with Democratic local governments, and nothing's changing. And it's because you voted in these Democrats. It's like, sure, maybe on the outside they may seem like they're on your side, but on the inside you've just voted for someone because of their identity, not because of anything they promised or what they've done in the past. You voted,
or it's or it's because that person that they think's a Democrat said, oh no, I'm running against this racist opponent.
Yeah.
So they vote against that guy. Like they're not even voting for, Gavin Newsom or voting for Kamala Harris. They're just voting because it can't be that guy. It can't be him. And they do like these smear campaigns in all these tens of different ways. He's racist. He's a supremacist. He's a Nazi. He hates women. Some of the newer ones that they've kind of run with different people is like they'll smear him with like child trafficking allegations, and that's honestly like the most damaging of any allegation that you can get. And I think it's funny that you brought it to a guy posting something about like, oh, he hates I hate women, or like men are so much better than women. It's funny because I think from a Christian perspective there is a slight bit of truth to that when it comes to the physicality, not in terms of being superior in all ways, but understanding that there is a symbiotic relationship. So on for a lot of things, right, like men are better at women then, and there are other things where women are better than men at. But it seems that women don't appreciate the things that they're better than men at. Like women don't appreciate that they can cook better than men. Women don't appreciate that they can be more cleanly than men. Women don't appreciate that they can be better organizers. They don't appreciate that they're better administrators. They don't want those roles. And so you have the rhetoric even at the top making all of these kind of be soured. And what was sad is I watched this video of a woman crying on stage talking about how she went her entire life living in fear that one day, she would just have to be just a mother. And she kind of worded it and phrased it in the fact that, she didn't want to be at a party, which, and again, it's kind of weird to have a frame set where you're a mother and you're at some kind of party. It's like, again, what are you doing? What are your priorities here? But she kind of worded it in the fact of, she didn't want to be at a party where her husband's like, I do this and I do this. And she has to go like, well, I'm just a mother. And that's because it was compounded and socially reinforced from Hollywood to Rachel Maddows of the world to CNN to all the different sources you can get it from, that being just a mother is somehow like modern day slavery. And that in and of itself is broken.
And then you're also assuming that people that like other guys are going to be like, just a mother. And you're like, no guy wants to, like, no guy is like, you just popped a baby out. No, and you like do everything for the house. It's like, no guy is like, that's an easy task.
Right.
Because like, if it were just an easy task, they'd be like, oh man, I love the way things are now. I'll just be the guy that stays at home. And it's like, for me, it doesn't really matter to me what a woman wants to do, as long as like their job isn't their personality, which is the same thing for me. I don't expect something of someone else that I don't expect of myself. And funny enough, what you were talking about with the sort of like the equality or people being different, is I'm reading this book called Evidence Unseen, and it's by the author James Rochford. He is he's like one of the elders in the church that I go to, and I'm not far into it, so I really cannot deeply describe it. But
okay.
And one of the parts he's talking about how he's like, believe it or not, people are created differently. He's like, you're not gonna have, he's like, Stephen Hawking and LeBron James are not the same person. They can't compete on the same level. Like, Stephen Hawking's not going to go to the NBA, and he's not going to go to the NBA and be able to score any points. And then, LeBron James isn't going to be able to give a press conference or a lecture on any sort of science. Like,
right.
So I do feel like the importance of realizing that some people have different and better qualities than you, like, humbles you, and then also keeps you away from like having the ego boost or like some sort of like complex and needing to fight those.
Well, yeah, I mean, it's just, we will just be like as real as possible here, right? No two men are created equally, but their spirits are equal in value to God.
Yes.
Right. Even if you were to take two, you could pick any two men over and over and over and over and over again. Like,
which is the point that he's making in that.
Yeah.
People are different, but to God, you're the same.
Right. And that's what we moved away from. I think even growing in high school, I think that was the rhetoric before it began to change, right? It was like, everybody's unique, everyone's different. Like, everyone's got these different traits. And then somewhere along the line, it did become like, we're all the same. you're the same exact thing as them, right? You're this. Everyone, no one's different from each other. Like, how dare you even bring those things out? And so you kind of move away from these kind of ideas where it's like, can we just be honest with ourselves? Like, that guy's definitely better at basketball. That guy's better at tennis. That guy's better at football. You know, it's plain to see. So I think that's what's so unnerving about it, is that it's so overtly obvious, and then everything that speaks to it is the complete opposite. You know, you see, you know, the easiest example for this is with transgenderism, where the guy's like, "I'm a woman," and you're like, "No," you know, like, "No," and then you get compounded by the fact that all these other people are like, they try to keep up with these arguments, you know, and you'll see like this bullhorn wearing kind of blue-haired girl go, "Oh, he's definitely a woman." And so you're fighting against other people who are bought into these crazy ideas. And it kind of unnerves the average person with reality, all in all, turning into exactly where you get, you know, individuals as yourself, where you're like, I just want to tune out. Like, this is ridiculous, dude. Like, like, it's so insane, and everything's pissing me off. Like, I don't, you know, I don't want to be a part of this anymore. And that's where they win. And I think that's what the goal was, right? The goal was to get people to tune out. And now it's gotten to the point where it's so insane. It's like, okay, everyone's got to come back in. We got to fight this fight, dude, or we're going to lose everything. And that's essentially where I'm at. You know, it's like I have to speak truth to some of this stuff.
Yeah, I get that. Wasn't like being transgender considered at one point a mental illness? Like, it was like, you know, but like,
Yeah.
and which, you know, I don't see how it isn't. It's like, why would you even say it's not anymore? Like, why would you get rid of that? Be like, nah, that's not listed as a mental illness anymore. As if that somehow just makes it better, because now you're just normalizing it, which is
So
like,
I think
it shouldn't be normal. Like, it shouldn't be. Sure, I'm like, there's a lot more people, so I'm sure it's much more frequent. And I do believe that there are people out there that truly likely are that way, where they're like, I am like confident that I am a, you know, I'm a man or I'm a woman. But like, at the same time, those people don't make it their whole personality. You like, they're like, of course, when they make the switch, they're not like, let me just make sure everyone knows, like, let me just change all my stuff, like, I am a woman, but not just a woman, a trans woman. And you're just like, yeah, it's cool. Like, if you would have just told me you're a woman, I'd be like, okay, like, whatever. But like, the fact you have to make it so apparent and in my face is like,
right.
Like, what? I wouldn't have thought otherwise until you made it such a big deal.
So, well, as far as I understand, gender dysphoria is what is classified as I don't know if it's a mental illness or if it's like a condition. But that's again what they as the precursor to then allowing the hormone therapy as healthcare. So you do label that as like, oh, gender dysphoria is an illness, so it needs to be treated with allowing them to become what they say they are. Now, there's also other forms of dysphoria, and it's one that other people bring up all the time, where it's like body dysphoria. And so, does that mean that when a guy comes to like the doctor and he goes, "I don't think I should have my hand anymore," or just like, "Chop it off, boys," you know? But they won't do that. Like, no doctor would do that in their right mind. But all of a sudden, it's allowed for something that not only is quite honestly a bit more meaningful in your posterity, but secondly has ridiculously complications and consequences down the road, such as being sterilized and not being able to raise children, or outright just stunting your growth by taking on hormone therapy at some point, either pre-puberty or afterwards. And actually, that, you know, we covered Jeff Younger earlier, but he made the point that the rhetoric needs to be that puberty is a human natural right. Like, every human deserves the right to be able to go through puberty. And in fact, to take that away from them, you remove their ability or their chance that at life that was allowed them to fully develop into who they should have been. And especially when you do look at cases of gender dysphoria, it generally does occur before puberty, especially in girls at the age of like 11, is like one of the most common rates. And then more often than not, they develop out of it. And I think you and I could both sit here, because I'm sure you have examples of your own end too. Every guy can probably think of their high school days where there's a bunch of tom girls. And if you look back at them now, they're nothing like a tom girl. They completely grew out of it. And in fact, most of those tom girls ended up turning into and blossoming into probably more of the better looking women who even were back in high school, comparatively so.
100%.
And I think that needs to be the rhetoric we carry forward, which is human puberty, or puberty in general, I should say, is a natural right. right? And to do anything to prevent that or block their natural coming of age is insane, dude. Like, there's no way you should be preventing a natural process like that. Like, you are playing God at that point. You are trying to interject and play God. And that's what we need to move away from too. And I think, if anything, transgenderism is the one that's that issue that kind of sticks out, and people on both sides of the aisle go like, I'm not cool with that, dude. Like, we're not playing this game. And I think especially because they can view it from the lens of how people are doing it to kids, and they like, no one in their right mind would want to jeopardize some kind of crazy instance like that happening to their child. Especially when you see like Jeff Younger, you're like, dude, I would hate that happened to me.
That's when you know it's identity politics, when they like try to take something that feels really personal to you.
Yeah.
And I feel like when it comes to that, damn, I'm kind of blanking, but it's I totally blanked, dude. I got way too far ahead of myself. I'm
you're
like
good.
sitting here thinking about.
I was actually going to segue to a couple other videos here. We can actually go ahead and change it because we actually went long on the transgender thing. We'll go to be a bit more offensive, right? It is offensively accurate.
Oh,
not a single drop of testosterone is in this video. At least it's what Benny Johnson says. Let me go ahead and actually share this tab real quick. It's about a minute long, and it's going to be very, very cringe. But we'll go ahead and take a listen to it.
We're going to the Harris Bullets rally. Woo!
Oh, you're not sharing your screen.
That's hilarious. Oh, that's because I didn't put it on screen. We put you back on here. There we go. Yeah, I'm getting used to StreamYard.
Guys, we're going to the Harris Bullets rally.
Remember, not a single drop of testosterone is supposed to be in this video. So I think the point got across, right? This is how the Kamala Harris campaign is running their social media. Now, if you're asking me, not only is the music cringe, but I did find most men in that video to be exactly what I would imagine Benny Johnson was pointing out, which was no testosterone at all. And I think this speaks to the fact that Donald Trump is like the party of the patriarchy, right? And Kamala Harris is like the party of the matriarchy. Now, I don't think Donald Trump is outright nor exceptionally heralding that mantle, but I think in different things that he's exhibiting, like obviously getting shot at, standing up and raising his fist, that is overwhelmingly masculine. It's something that you probably wouldn't see from any other president in the past, 3 of them, including Obama and Biden as well. I mean, fortunately, if it was Biden, he'd be like, what happened? He's like, y'all hear some? That'd be him. And I think that goes back again to the crux of what is driving a lot of what we see in this election. And so I don't know if you're familiar or not, but if you see these disparities between girls voting and men voting, girls are voting at a rate of liberal at around like 68%. I think it's single women who identify as liberal vote, or I guess the thing is just single women, forgive me, vote at a rate of 68% Democrat. Where single men, I think it's vote at like a 55% rate Republican. So the disparities are like massive, right? And so I think that goes to show the war of the sexes is probably the one that is the most meaningful when it comes to seeing what's going on in politics and why people are voting the way that they vote. Now, obviously, race and transgender are thrown in there too, but I think obviously the ones that affect literally every single person are the ones that is between the sexes, between male and female. I think this speaks to the fact that, as of my belief, that they have slowly tried to erode masculinity out completely in more ways than one. Now, obviously, they do like the toxic masculinity, like, oh, that guy trying to that guy holding the door open for you, toxic masculinity, like all these kinds of things where they have done and tried to convert any regular amount of normal masculine is toxic in some form, right?
Yeah.
Until this stretches to the point where we're at now, where a girl goes, "Oh, you're asking for my body count? What are you, insecure?" And it's like, I don't want to be with a porn star, dude. Like, are you kidding me? Like, I can't have preferences. And so you see things, and this is just in the dating market as well, but it's like male preference. And the girl's like, dude, are you insecure? And it's like male preference. Dude, are you insecure? And then a girl goes, if a guy doesn't do this and this and this and this and this and this, he's trash. Then it's like, okay. It's like, okay, I see how we're playing this.
Like the imbalance of all the expectations of someone else. It's like you're allowed to have a preference on who you want, for sure.
Yeah.
It's important that it's important that you have those, or else how are you going to be confident that marriage is going to last? Obviously you can argue like through God you can work through anything, but
right.
I don't think it's worth having a good foundation at start. And I think if you were to ask someone's like how many people they've had sex with, I think it's important to like obviously not carry a bias in that if you are the same person. Like if you're
and I
the
think
same
there's like a
person,
very better way to ask it though, than just being
yeah.
like super forthcoming like that. There are ways that you can kind of like
Well, that's
meaningfully ask it in the right framing.
That's stuff you definitely ask before marriage, not during. Like,
yeah.
That's obviously
it's way too
stuff
late at that point.
Yeah. I'd be like, okay, like we're married. Just go ahead and never tell me anything that happened. I don't know. I want to know I don't want to know anything freaky you did. Like, we'll leave it all in the past.
Yeah, right. And I think because you know it, as you understand what that does to your brainwaves, just it does to your own psychology, how like unnerving it is, how like it doesn't even need, you don't even need to know who the person was, you don't even know what they look like. It's just by proxy of like knowing some of these things, it devalues your ability to value the person you're with because you can't see them the same. And it's one of these things where they've kind of like tried to erode that men think like this into like, instead of being like men think like this, they go, only evil bad men think like this. And it's like, dude, every guy thinks like that. Like, what do you like? What do you like? It's got biological origins for why they do, right?
I've never been in a relationship where it was like, well, we're hiding our phones, like we have to flip them over. Or to be like, I don't know my girlfriend's, phone password. And like the thing is, like, I do, but also at the same time, I'm don't have the insecurity to be like, I need to go check that. Like, I need to go see, like, make sure, of course, that like nothing's going on. Like in my,
and it's like,
because I would never have been with them if I felt like I am at a point of insecurity. I'd be like, well, this is not working. But I also just don't carry that anyway,
Well, I think you were spot on with like with the foundation, and I think that speaks back a bit more to just like, Christ in general, which is like, don't ask of God what man can do. Right. And so it's like, if you have the ability to kind of vet your partner beforehand, you should be doing that, right? Instead of just like throwing it all on God and being like, well, I married a prostitute, God fixed the marriage. It's like, God's like, dude, you did this to yourself, and but just being like, don't throw everything upon me when you have all of these things. I gave you the ability to think critically. I gave you the ability to use judgment and good judgment and values. I gave you this. It's like, use those tools. And I guess the main point, though, to show it is, I think when the average guy sees the video we just played of the Kamala Harris campaign, they just kind of cringe at it.
Yeah.
And I think for a couple of reasons there. I think the overt nature of all of these videos with these girls like dancing and like doing this just super gay stuff is kind of like this victory dance. It's almost like seemingly it's like they're dancing at you kind of vibe. Now I can't speak for everybody, and then let alone it's probably less so in that video. Other ones speak more to that, but it's kind of like a feminist victory dance. It's like we're gonna do this, and you better take it and enjoy it. And you see this rhetoric as well too, as on spaces like X and other social media platforms where girls are like, oh, any guy who has a problem with this just hates women. And it's like, so you took the nuance completely out of it, And so now you've obfuscated any dissent as I hate women. Okay. And some guys will just take into bat and be like, fair enough, call me whatever you want, and I still hate this. Like it's like this and this and this. And they'll point out reasons of like, you're doing this, I don't like this. Now that one's
Or
done in like a more neutral form, but I think the ones in particular, like when you see like those college fraternity ones, where there's a recent one where I mean I'm telling you, like you're seeing a camel toe once every like 0.3 seconds, and that's something for me where I even see Christian girls and thought leaders and pundits. I hate to say the word thought leaders, but like those who are in the space who have a good followings, they point out to these things and they're like anyone has a problem with this, like da 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 da. But as a father who's getting ready to bring in a daughter into this world, I see these things and I'm like, I don't want that influence on my daughter. I don't find it how you can sit here and be a Christian and then you look at a video of entirely immodest woman wearing the tightest clothing I've ever seen on God's green earth, and you say, wow, nothing's wrong with this. Like, I don't want my daughter to be in that position. So if I see Christian female leaders taking that spot and taking that voice, I have to be like, okay, I can't listen to you. You can't be a voice for my daughter, because you're going to lead her down this path where she may possibly be in a video seen by millions of people where her clothes are so tight, like it looks like I recorded it in an 8K camera. And like, it's like very, very slightly drawing the line of like being kind of pornographic and very lustful content. And that's the stuff that really rubs me wrong.
Yeah. And like, the funny thing is, it's like the same people that are, the same women that are all about, like, you should be okay with this. This shouldn't bother you. And like, but I'm going to have all these expectations of you. I mean, those are the same women that are like they're never going to be with a soy boy. Like, you know what I'm saying? Like,
right.
They're never going to date someone that actually like values all the things that they just said. Yeah, it's all, they're still going to be like, God, I just want a man, like an actual man. I'm still going to complain about him, but like, why is it that you have this innate urge to go after someone masculine? And it's like, well, yeah, maybe there's something to that.
It's rules for thee, not for me.
Yeah.
It's, it's paying homage to the idea, like, I'm going to say the correct opinion, but then I'm going to go and do and act in the complete opposite way that speaks nothing to what I just said, right? It's exactly what you were saying. Like, oh, guys can cry, in front of me. And guys, and then like next thing you know, a guy cries in front of her, and she's like, "Well, that's why I broke up, because he cried."
It's like, and it's like, yeah, and then find me someone who's like, I want him to do everything I say, because the truth is that may be something you want initially, or something that you think is like good initially, but then you're like, this guy's a pussy. Like, he doesn't fight me on anything. And he just listens to everything I say. It's like,
right.
Now I feel like the relationship's boring, and in reality, they want toxicity.
Right. Like, and it's like they'll label it as toxicity, but really it's like it's him setting firm boundaries. It's assertiveness. It's like it's some level of domination to which she will submit to. It's like they will say, no, I don't want that. But then when a guy comes into their life he's like this and this, I ain't putting up with that, she's like, wow, he's so mysterious. And it's just like, no, it's just a guy saying that he's not going to put up with crap that you would put another random kind of less masculine guy through the ringer for. And I think it's overtly obvious to people like you and I. Anyone watching can just look right through this stuff and they go,
I mean,
like, really,
I do feel like most people do feel that way. Although I guess it's hard to say anymore with like how prevalent it is.
And that's the unfortunate thing, dude, is like, it's really taken over. It's gone to these levels that, I think it speaks to Jeff Younger, where it's like, do you really expect this to get pulled back? And even as someone who, with like Trump being the right-wing candidate, he's still a moderate. He's still a New York Democrat. He's someone who's okay with homosexual marriage. He's not truly an outspoken Christian, although he is, like, he has, spoken that he does believe. So again, it kind of fits that more cultural Christian kind of narrative. And so I think there are some guys who are probably younger than I who are having a much worse time than what you and I had, and a much more politically dense and socially confusing arena, that I think some of these ideas like Jeff Younger put forward, or just like outright not participating with women entirely, make a lot more sense to them. And I think that actually speaks specifically to Paul, talking about, there are some men who are better off, never marrying. And, I always specifically bring up the verses, and Lord forgive me because I can never remember what book it's from or what chapter. Maybe somebody in the audience can correct me or point it out to me, which is Jesus is explaining the grounds of which it's acceptable for divorce. And so the disciples are talking about, well, God allowed Moses to give the certificate of divorce this, and Jesus is like, those times have changed. He says, I tell you this, and he goes into like the only reasons that you can essentially get a divorce for is like abuse, like physical, like abuse, right?
Yeah.
Outside of that, it's like there's nothing, dude. It's like even cheating, even lying to each other, like spending out, like going out and spending money. Those aren't good enough reasons for divorce. And so when hearing this, the disciples were like abhorred. They're like, okay, like like maybe I don't want to get married. Like that's a little out there.
Most people draw.
Yeah, but think about it though. The disciples said that during those times when women were like in a much more closer to how they are supposed to biologically operate fashion. So if they're saying it then, well then apply that to now. It's like, well, I think the advice I should be giving men is to not marry. Like, why would you put yourself in a position where you can fail and the state can take your kids and then you can be, hooked up to some money machine where you essentially become a wallet for another woman? Well, then she's allowed to then go and remarry and do other things, and you're stuck in some position that is financially tied, honestly, like outright oppressing you because the state has taken possession of your children. The state is allowed to come in and decide who gets the kids, right? Obviously with arguments and such, but we see how family court plays out. It leans so heavily towards females. And the cases, the average person knows like the only way a girl's not going to have have custody of her kids is if she's smoking crack in front of the judge. Like that's like how hard you got to get like evidence on a woman to be able to allow a man to have full custody. So there's already everything working against them. It's sad because I wish I could sit here and say like, oh, men should go and get married, men should go and do this. But when I see all of the actual facts that back up everything that could break them and take things away from them, in fact, I would find it that if they were to get into a marriage and then get divorced and then lose their kids, I would expect them to have a harder time than getting salvation had they never been married at all.
Yeah, but I do believe it's better to have loved than lost, and I do think it's like, oh, there you go.
Yeah, Matthew 19:8-9. Thank you very much. I can actually look at it.
Yeah, pull them up. So, I do think it's important that you should absolutely find someone to marry. If you don't want to, like, that's fine too. Having a woman in your life is not a promise that God made. And like the same thing for women. Having a man in your life is not what God promised. That was something that we were given the benefit to have. And at the same time, it's something that you cherish so deeply, and having a relationship like that you should make sure that you're finding the perfect person. Like that's something you should take seriously. And like you should talk about things before you just like, decide something so rashly.
Yeah. And it should be, it should be meaningful, and thank you for pointing this out here. Oh, he's even writing it down too.
Oh, nice.
Thank you very much for this. I appreciate it. This is the opening aspect of the verses, and we have it on screen here. Hopefully it's easier to see for people. And it talks about when Jesus had finished saying these things, he left Galilee and went to the Judea. Large crowds followed him to heal him. And so some Pharisees came to him to test him. They asked, is it lawful for a man to divorce his wife for any and every reason? Haven't you read, he replied, that at the beginning the Creator made them male and female, and said, for this reason a man will leave his father and mother and be united to his wife, and the two will become one flesh. So they are no longer two, but one flesh. Therefore, what God has joined together, let no one separate. Why then, they asked, did Moses command that a man give his wife a certificate of divorce and send her away? Jesus replied, Moses permitted you to divorce your wives because your hearts were hard, but it was not this way from the beginning. I tell you that anyone who divorces his wife except for sexual immorality and marries another woman commits adultery. The disciples said to him, if this is the situation between a husband and wife, it is better not to marry. So that's like the disciples conjointedly being like, oh, dude, like if that's what the stakes are, like, okay, we're not at all.
Mhm.
So just the guy says only infidelity is grounds for divorce. And what's wild is I'll have to remember, because it was a while since I actually covered this. There are arguments that even infidelity is not. And with this specific translation, this portion changes. So forgive me, and I don't want to be specific, so we can leave that argument for another day, outside of the reasons. But I think the overall grounds here is the disciples, even with these allowances, they're like, so like you're telling me like if she goes and like does this to my dog, like I can't divorce with someone? It's like, nope. If she goes and does this to me, like you can't, nope. It's like it's only this. It is only this specific reason. It's only for these very tiny, minute allowances. And so Jesus replies, he goes, not everyone can accept this, but only those to whom it has been given. For there are eunuchs who are born that way, and there are eunuchs who have been made eunuchs by others. And then there are those who choose to live like eunuchs for the sake of the kingdom of heaven. The one who can accept this should accept it. And so I think, even him, now Paul's going to even kind of back him up later down, and I believe it's in Timothy, that it is only for certain amount of men. And I think you're right on what you were saying, that marriage isn't meant for everybody, especially because not everybody's going to have the frame of mind to accept this with this level of conviction, which is where you get to these instances where it's extremely poor. It's extremely rough. And I think one of the worst things, I think, as we've begun to notice and grow up, is seeing all of the countless examples of fatherless homes, broken homes, being split up between all these different things. And how can you expect a child to have a single, a unified morality when that's the case, right? Having to go back and forth between mom and dad. Mom says this and this about dad. Dad says this about mom. And it's just like, it's subvertive, it's erosive. And the next thing you know, it's like the kid doesn't listen to either of them. He can't view them as authority figures. They constantly undermine each other. And I think the main thing here, though, is by the pure fact of marriage is such a significant conviction. It's a very, very beautiful thing, for one, but because it is such a great and need to be respected thing, that's why I feel like I'm in the position where it's like, how can I sit here and say with the right mind that these men need to go and get married, when I can see the writing on the wall with how the state controls it, with how modern women act? It's like I'm sending them into a wood chipper. Like that's essentially how I view it. It's like, sure, some of you might bounce off the edge and make it out and be like, hey, dude, nothing happened to me. But for the majority of you guys, it's only going to be a matter of time before your lives are destroyed. And then you're sitting there hating women from a distance too. And it's pretty unfortunate. What's funny is we got Roman actually joining here. I actually didn't message him ahead of time. So we'll see where he's at. We'll bring him into this conversation. We'll bring him in with this specific portion, actually. Go ahead and share this tab instead. Now let's see. Let me go back to the original here. Okay. We brought in Roman for everybody who is who's watching out there. It looks like his mic might be off. You don't need to turn your camera on, Roman. We're actually going to cover this montage from Alex Jones. And this montage is Democrats uniquely they're planning to put conservatives in re-education camps, and everything that's kind of spoke to this ever since these different moments. I'm not sure if he can hear us or not, but he can join. I'll keep him on screen here. I'll go ahead and slide everybody back over. We'll take a watch on this video. It's about 6 minutes long. I'm kind of making a hard segue from where we just were at. But I think it's probably one of these great places to end, seeing only about 12 minutes left. We hit the 2-hour mark. And just a reminder, I think, for everybody, the rhetoric that's being exercised against us, and I say us, I guess, conservatives. And for me, I think if you're a Christian, that automatically makes you conservative, and it should be. And, I'm in the position where I find it, okay. I guess what would your argument against that be?
I think that there's like certain socialist values that like don't align with what conservatives believe that you should have as a Christian, and that's kind of why I like lean. That's probably what makes me lean left. Is like,
I guess, what are these socialist values?
Well, whether you want it or not, it's like when it comes to shutting people out of America, uh, whether it be good or bad, it's also just not something that you could really say lines up with what Christianity tells you. And then
It definitely does. You know what the Tower of Babel is?
no.
So the Tower of Babel is the exact reason why we have the arguments for nation states. So the story of the Tower of Babel is that it was when everyone spoke the same language, all of these different, all the different tribes came together and they were like, we're going to build a tower to God. And essentially what they were wanting to do is they wanted to, following the progressive and socialist trait like you just put forward, they were wanting to be, I guess, what's the word? They wanted to ascend, right? They wanted to make themselves better beings. Like, our goal is to be up to you, God. And then what did God do to the Tower of Babel? He comes in, he makes all of these people speak different languages, and he casts them. He goes, go and spread throughout the lands. He was like, you're congregating in too many areas, on one area. He's like, I need you to go and spread throughout the diverse areas. The problem with the progressivism is exactly that. It wants to make everyone the same. It wants to be androgynous, and it wants to bring everyone under one banner when that's not realistic. Even you and I, how we just talked earlier about no two men are equal. No two races are equal either. When you look even at genetic levels, there's we can go to even sickle cell. It's the most easy example you can bring up. The Black population suffers from sickle cell disease at a higher rate than any other ethnicity. There's also a bunch of other genetic differences that are shown in the ethnicity groups between Eastern Asians, Western Europeans, now differences we even see between Western Americans, which are majority made up of Western Europeans, but there are slight differences even amongst them now too. And then you have Sub-Sahara as well.
Mm-hmm.
So to deny these differences, right, is to deny the differences between nation states. Now you also have to go into the other grounds of the fact that there is specific biblical structuring to the sovereignty of nations. Like, nations don't just open their borders to people. In fact, God punished people by allowing Canaanites and other individuals like the Cretes to dominate in borders and push across borders. Like, that was a punishment, right? God punished certain tribes by saying, like, I'm going to open up your borders and allow these people in. That was a punishment by the Lord. So what gets confused is what you were trying to, I guess, argue for.
And it was one example that I wasn't planning on spending too much time explaining, such as universal health care, or just free things that honestly should be education shouldn't cost you anything, especially if you're trying to grow your society and actually care about your people. It's the same thing with universal health care. I get that, you look at places like Canada and there's a bunch of people that are underserved. But it's still a capitalist society. So there still would be hospitals that'll be like, well, we'll take you. You can pay us and we'll take you. But I don't think that a child or anyone that is truly sick should be rejected from receiving any sort of aid.
No, I think you're making a couple different arguments there. Yes, if someone has the ability to provide aid to a child and they know that they can, they definitely should be.
Yes,
but I think when you argue it from the socialist perspective, you're arguing that a person is entitled to that care from another individual.
Yeah.
Not that the individual should do it out of the goodness of their heart. And I think that comes from two different places. If you were to go to the education thing, I think that you are also right. Education should be as free as possible, but not through the framing of socialism. Not because we force people to open up, not because we force educators, not because we make teachers give their services for free, but because the society operates so well that education flows at such a low cost, it's almost meaningless. And so I think there's two different ways to frame it there. So I think it's less so socialist ideology, but more so a matter of abundance and a matter of mindset and framing there. Because once you put in the socialist tag there, I mean, socialism is purely the means of capturing production. That's what socialism is, right? So socialism literally specifically means that the state now owns the means of production for education. Thus, they are the ones who are now allowed to decide how it is allocated.
Mhm.
And so imagine you who spent your entire life, like whatever your mission may be, like say it's coding, right? And you made a video game. But say the state then decides now that this video game is actually so good that it should be free for everybody because it's so educational. Well, then now everything you worked for in your entire life, the state now took over. And as we get in all these examples, like
That
they'll
is
pay you almost
funded by
nothing for it.
but
And then now it's completely free.
yes, to the public, like you're not personally going to make all the money you could make from it. For sure. But that's also it's a little different when it comes to healthcare. I mean, I feel like if you are going into the business of being a doctor and your sole purpose of doing it is not because you want to help people, you're a piece of shit. Like, you're not going to convince me otherwise. Because, like, if you are
I
going to be like
understand that.
yeah, like if you're not going to be a family doctor, if you are a family doctor and you are totally in it for the fame and money, which I honestly do believe is the majority of doctors. But if you are going to go into that job with that sort of mindset, how many people do you just not care about that are actually having issues? And how many, anytime I've like had a health issue, for instance, it's crazy the amount of times I've been told like, it's just anxiety. Yeah, you're probably just anxious about it. I'm like, I don't know. I don't think that's the case because like if that were the
Well,
case, like why is it different now? Like what? Like anxiety is like the go-to for it. I'm getting a little off topic, but
oh, you're fine. If I was to argue against it, though, I would say, imagine how hard it is to be a doctor. You know, especially with its
well, that's why it
specializations and
pays so
stuff.
much. Yeah.
Well, that's what I'm saying. If it's socialism and it's universal healthcare, they're not going to be getting paid as much. So now imagine now you have to work 6 12-hour shifts a week and you're getting paid the same amount as a McDonald's worker. Why would you ever do it?
For sure, because it would just limit all of the doctors to being people that want to do it because they care about helping people.
I think I understand the logic there and how like, oh, you're gonna
I
like
get
bleed
it.
out and all that.
It's
I think
hard to,
though at a floor level though,
yeah,
nobody would want to be a doctor
I agree.
because there is still a certain level of like, I'm going to take on this responsibility because the reward is also going to meet the same level of responsibility. You see what I'm saying? So like if it's like, and you can stretch this too, like say it's a veterinarian, right? Well, what would prevent, you know, all the people who like want to help people just go be veterinarians instead?
Yes.
And then you force yourself into positions where then you may very well have to force people to do jobs they didn't want to do, to allocate to a society where, because capitalism is free flowing, where people allocate amongst themselves, right? Like they just like people naturally fall where they want to go because there's no restrictions. There's no state telling you that you can and can't do a specific path or career path.
But and capitalism is kind of the extreme opposite of like what universal healthcare would implement. Where like,
Right.
you know,
But
hospitals
you're
are
saying,
free. Yeah, what I do believe is that it's something I want, and I think it's something that is deserved. But much like communism, it's better on paper than it actually works for human society because there's just not that many good people in this world that would go out of their way to do and learn something just for the betterment of the people around them, or just people they don't know.
so wouldn't you say it'd be more imperative then to worry about getting everyone to be Christian first before you were to force a socialist like agenda? Because then I think when you say free universal healthcare, that implies that you also have to put forward the statement of you look a doctor in the eye and say, I deserve to be treated by you at no cost.
Yes, and it's a complicated issue that just because it's complicated doesn't mean we should move towards finding a way to make it something that's available for everyone. You know, regardless of like maybe it isn't universal healthcare, maybe that's not the issue, maybe that's the extreme of the solution, But regardless, the goal should be that everyone can go to that hospital without having to worry about a 6-figure bill if it's something super serious.
And I think that we totally could. And that could be done under the fact of if Christian framing and ethics were the actual dominant structure of the country and not capitalism, not socialism. If everyone was in a actual like predominant Christian neighborhood, then you would imagine that these things would then follow. Like the church would rally around and be like, this person needs this and this. And then you get the best of both worlds. The person didn't have to pay for their health care, and the doctor was then benefited righteously so for their work, right? And it's very biblical that you need to pay for your debts, right? You owe, like that's also biblical. So to demand that you, I guess I'm not saying that you demand it, because I'm just saying socialism and the way it's set up, what asks and demands these things. When you put it in that form, then I think the biggest thing from that is it takes the floor out from people who say, when they're deciding and growing up, they go, well, if I can do this and do this, like I would much rather do the thing that's much less effort required if I'm going to be compensated the same. And then if you support exactly what you want with the free healthcare, and you set up programs where churches can help fund, and through prayer chains and things of that nature too, not just in financial means, a support system for people who do have issues and health complications that can funnel their way into supporting the least beneficial of us all. That is, I think, the better way to implement everything over socialism, which then has to because socialism actually forces the means of production into the state's hands. So then now the doctor doesn't own his equipment, the doctor really doesn't own himself, and at a moment's notice, he can be woken up at 2 a.m. and it's like, oh no, you need to go to the office here because the state's demanding that you take care of this person, and you're not going to even get paid for it.
Well, and I imagine the reason, it's not solely the reason, but partially why doctors are paid so heavily is also because of the student loan debt that they have to pay back,
right?
Which takes,
and that's also a side point too. It's just like that's reason why your health bill is insanely high too.
Yeah,
it's because it's bloated by the fact that they have to go to school for I don't even know if they have to, but it's like, the current programs have them 4 years undergrad, 4 years postgrad, 2 years residency, and then if they do a specialization, that's like another 2 years. And next thing you know, it's 12 years of schooling they have to pay back on, which then even ups the ante for well, if they want to be a doctor, it's like, well, they better be making this much money or it wasn't even worth it in the first place.
Yeah.
And so I think that also it denies ambition too. Right, because you could have doctors who are maybe they want to be doctors because they also want to work on things scientifically and find better and unique innovations. Well, one of the reasons for these innovations that they would drive themselves to do would be for the recognition that they their legacy, right? They did this. It's like I discovered the cure to this thing, or I discovered the technology for this thing. I think all of those disappear under socialism. And you kind of lose the innovation aspect, the kind of ingenuity and the creativity, the desire to bring about new and change and of that stuff too.
Mm-hmm.
But we went past 2 hour mark. We're probably not going to do the Alex Jones thing. Was there anything that you wanted to say before we sign off?
People be better. I think it's really as simple as that, dude. I think a lot of people don't, even if you're not a Christian. I think the other important thing is that obviously it's something you need to figure out on your own, but it's important that you actually go seek it out. There's an analogy in this book that I'm reading, the same one, The Evidence Unseen, where he talks about 2 men stranded on an island, and they're on death's door and they're waiting, and one guy's like, well, I'm gonna go out and look for food. And let me say, I might butcher the story, but you'll get the point.
It's all good.
So one guy's like, well, I'm gonna go out and look for food, or any sort of help, or see if there's anything on this island we can use. And he comes back a few hours later and he's like, hey, I actually found a boat. He's like, there's a boat here with people. They'll save us right now. They're just wait like that. I see them. I saw them. I know where they're at, but they're not going to be here forever. And he's like, and the guy's like, the other person he's talking to is like, well, I'm not going to go do that because what are you trying to take my spot in the shade? I don't feel like walking a couple minutes to go find this. And the guy's like, okay, well, you could either stay here and die, or I could be lying and you just wasted a 5-minute walk to go find out there's salvation over there. And I think it speaks a lot to what it really means to like look into Christianity. And if it's something you struggle with too, you can look at other people that have looked into Christianity and try to disprove it and end up being hardcore believers. I can't think of any examples off the top of my head, but it happens a lot. And it's worth looking into. That's all I'm saying. It's not like you have to be a devout, but you can also spend a little bit of time trying to figure it out. But that's really all I wanted to say. And that's like a lot of the message I wanted to get out. It's something that really can make a big impact in your life.
I think you're spot on with that, and I think if I was to sign up on that message too, it's something that I've been doing even more hardcore, especially because the more I've been getting into Christianity, the more I see what the current surface level message is, and kind of like seeing how even that's being subverted, right? Like you have bad actors inside of the church as well. That's how you get to things like the egalitarianism, the progressivism, people saying, God is a girl, God loves all these things. We're not going to read specific portions of the Bible. We're going to censor on our own end. And that's why it's also, once you do begin to get an understanding, if you choose to do so, it's also very, very important, crucial even, that you ensure that you're also verifying and checking and making sure the historical context matches, like the verses match, and you ensure that you're also getting it from a source that you can trust.
Yeah.
And even if all else fails, it's most importantly that you even just develop this relationship by reading the Bible of your own accord. You begin to develop these ideas and thoughts on your own, and then you take them to someone, right? And you take them to a pastor, you take them to a church, then you begin to get involved. And then from there, you begin to like bounce your ideas off of each other as well. And so for me too, some of the the historical perspective with theology and like the philosophy behind these things, it began to be very, very apparent and clear for me to see that there's a lot that we're not practicing that's in the Bible. And it seems to be that we have gotten to this point where we like to pick and choose what we want, and we're not going to do so much of that stuff because like that doesn't sound good, We're like, we've decided we don't want to do that anymore. And so there's a lot of hiccups and a lot of stumbling blocks that come along with getting into the faith. But I think you're spot on, Nick, with anyone who's like, even partially like on the fence or maybe not even got into it at all. It's well worth your look. I mean, beyond well worth your look. It's actually worth your entire soul.
I was gonna say I personally have always had an issue with the Christian community, like just throughout my entire life, until I found the right one, and they are out there, and they are genuinely the nicest people I've ever met, the most welcoming. The people I met never pressured me into believing. I went to a few like home churches, just listened to them talk about the Bible, rolled my eyes the whole time. Just, didn't really feel any sort of attachment to it till I realized like the people there, they all are extremely caring, and no one pressured me into it, but it was still of utmost concern to them that I would become a Christian, even though they never said it. They did it through their actions. And it is because it is eternal life that you benefit from, and they want to share that. And that's kind of the whole point. It's something it's been important for me to try to step into, as being someone that can share that with other people.
Yeah, well said. I thank you for coming on, Nick. Once again, I appreciate you for being here and giving us 2 hours of your hard-earned time, free time. And thanks for everybody in the audience who watched, especially for those of you who followed from start to finish. I appreciate it very much. This has been another episode of Offensively Accurate, and hopefully it was slightly more accurate than offensive. With that being said, though, everybody have a good night. Christ is King, and I will see you all next time, probably even tomorrow if I get a chance. So with that being said, everyone take care. Peace out.